Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Voice of America, the official podcast of the People's National Party. I'm your host, Owen, and on today's episode, we will be looking at the new jobs and infrastructure bill that just passed the House of Representatives and is on the way to Biden's desk for him to sign into law. This is part of his Build Back Better agenda, specifically in this case focusing on infrastructure, and with that, adding jobs to the economy with it. This is his first big bill. Some would argue it's too little too late after the November 2nd elections, but at least it's come, and Democrats are pretty excited about that. So we're just going to look into it, look at the key points of where the spending is going, what we're going to see, and hopefully how it's going to transform the American economy for the better. So to start off, some of the big areas that the Biden administration was trying to address with this infrastructure bill were putting money towards roads and bridges, public transit, passenger and freight rail, electric vehicles, internet access, modernizing the electric grid, airports, and water and wastewater. And we'll look into those in detail in a minute to find out exactly where the money is being allocated to and how much. But as for the actual bill that was passed Friday night, it was passed in the House, 228 to 206. Those were the votes. I believe 13 Republicans voted for the bill. 6 Democrats voted against it, and those 6 Democrats were the more progressive Democrats in the House. They argued that the bill didn't have enough money to address the problems that the communities were facing, specifically in this case with infrastructure and jobs. The $1.75 trillion social spending bill has not been passed yet, but the Democrats are hopeful for that to pass as well in the near future to give the Biden administration a second win in this first year. Now, as for the actual funding and where it's going, under roads and bridges, it says, and this is according to NPR, the bill would provide $110 billion to repair the nation's aging highways and bridges. According to the White House, 173,000 miles of America's highways and major roads and 45,000 bridges are in poor condition. And the almost $40 billion for bridges is the single largest dedicated bridge investment since the construction of the national highway system. Moving on to public transit, $39 billion for public transit is in the legislation, and it would expand transportation systems, improve accessibility for people with disabilities, and provide dollars for state and local governments to buy zero-emission and low-emission buses. Passenger and freight rail, a big issue for Biden personally. He's always known as the senator who would ride on the Amtrak train from Delaware to Washington, D.C. in his days of being senator. And he is investing $66 billion to improve the rail services of the Northeast Corridor, which is about 457 miles, as well as other routes. He originally wanted $80 billion towards this, but obviously the negotiations in the House and the Senate talked it down to that $66 billion that we will be having. This is the largest federal investment in passenger rail services since Amtrak was founded 50 years ago. As for electric vehicles, the bill would spend $7.5 billion on electric vehicle charging stations, which the administration says are critical to accelerating the use of electric vehicles to curb climate change. It would also provide $5 billion for the purchase of electric school buses and hybrids, reducing reliance on school buses that run on diesel fuel. Internet access, a huge, huge issue, especially for the younger generations. Legislation, there's $65 billion in the legislation for broadband access that would aim to improve internet services for rural areas, low-income families, and tribal communities. Most of the money would be made available through grants to states. As for modernizing the electric grid, to protect against power outages that have become more frequent in recent years, the bill would spend $65 billion to improve the reliability and resiliency of the power grid. This is a huge issue. A lot of Americans are will side together on this. Our power electric grid is extremely outdated. It's built for a much smaller population, back from like the 70s, I'm pretty sure, is the last time it was really updated. And addressing this issue would be huge for millions and millions of Americans. $25 billion will be spent to improve airports, including runways, gates, things like that. If that's an issue that's important to you, then, it's an issue that's important to you. I haven't heard a whole lot about the complaints that have come with the airports and the crumbling infrastructure in them. It's mostly about the roads, bridges, and broadband. And then finally, with water and wastewater, the legislation would spend $55 billion on water and wastewater infrastructure. It has $15 billion to replace the lead pipes and $10 billion to address water contamination through, this is a big word, polyfluoroalkyl substances, chemicals that were used in the production of Teflon and have also been used in firefighting foam, water repellent clothing, and many other items. So overall, this is a pretty interesting bill. It does address a lot of the infrastructure issues that Americans are facing, as I said. The Biden administration is predicting that this will create an additional 2 million jobs to the American economy in the coming decade, which could be great. Hopefully those are high-paying, quality jobs that, young men are able to take on to support a family. Because, the fact of the matter is that so many communities, mostly throughout the Midwest, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, they have been stripped of their jobs and their factories, coal mines, fracking, a lot of energy jobs that people grew up with. These communities were built off of these local economies. And these jobs are being taken out of these areas, whether it be because of AI advancement, shipping the jobs off to China for cheap labor, or just the new transition from fossil fuels to green energy. A lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people are living in poverty, specifically white Americans. A lot of people talk about how minorities are generally oppressed because they're living in poor, impoverished communities, and they don't have access to good quality education or job opportunities. But we're seeing this all over the South, all over the Midwest. White America is facing the same exact problems as Black America and, Hispanic, whatever other races they're talking about that are being oppressed, which really shows, it proves the point that, economic inequality is not a racial issue. It's an American issue, and we must address it. Infrastructure is the backbone of the American economy. It's the backbone of any economy. And if you don't have quality infrastructure, you can't create the jobs that fuel the rest of society. So investing into these communities, investing into the public transportation and the roads and the airports and the water and waterways, focusing on the electric grid. These are huge issues that deeply affect many people throughout America. And it's very difficult to see that if you're looking at this through a partisan perspective. If you're looking at this as a Republican or a Democrat, you're just going to be looking at the points you're earning, the little imaginary political points that you earn when you get a bill passed or when you say you oppose a bill. Republicans shouldn't be afraid that this is going to damage them for 2022 or 2024. Saying that you support federal funding for highways and bridges is not a bad thing. Donald Trump literally did the same exact thing under his administration. He had infrastructure spending. He spent federal money to improve communities, or he tried to at least, and that's what the Biden administration is attempting to do as well. Putting taxpayer dollars, in this case, it's not even taxpayer dollars, but putting federal funds to help communities and help the people is not a bad thing. It's not socialism when you do these types of things. It's being a honest, moral government that cares for its people, which is something we definitely need in today's day and age. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Voice of America, the official podcast of the People's National Party. I'm your host, Owen, and on today's episode, we will be talking about two different topics today. One of them being the new jobs and infrastructure bill that the Biden administration is about to sign into law. It just passed the House of Representatives week and a half ago. We'll be just talking about the different issues that it's attempting to address and how it'll hopefully help communities all across America thrive and prosper. We'll also be focusing on the new OSHA vaccine regulations and requirements that are going in place this week and for the time being forward into the future. We'll be talking about the constitutionality of that and if it is justifiable or unjustifiable to force workers to jab themselves with a needle that they don't necessarily want to take. So, join us. And being this moral, righteous government that cares for its citizens comes with responsibilities. We should reflect our government and our economy off of Christian social values and Western civilization as a whole. I think that's not really refutable. I'm pretty sure most people would agree with that, even if they don't want to, because it doesn't fit with their political narrative. However, as I said at the beginning, there is another issue we're going to be talking about, and that is the vaccine requirements and regulations that are being pushed by OSHA on the private sector. Is this justifiable? Is it unjustifiable? Is it constitutional? So, a moral and religious government that cares for its citizens would not let a corporation exploit its employees for slave labor, right? That is pretty well known. Something the Democrats take pride in. They take pride in being standing up for working families and the working people, opposing large corporations and monopolies, doing their best to not take money from them, even though they technically do. Those are their talking points. Well, that's great. The problem is that when you say you care for the workers, the employees, you have to stand with them 100% of the time. You can't just do it when it fits your political narrative or your agenda. So, what are the Democrats doing? They're siding with the large corporations and the elite, the political elite, the business elite. And they're starting to crack down and make requirements and regulations that every employee must be vaccinated or have negative COVID tests on a daily basis, or they will risk losing their job. It's one thing to regulate large corporations, large businesses, so that they don't exploit the workers, but it's another thing to regulate the actual workers. Because besides the fines that are going to be the business owners are going to be burdened with, they're not really being affected by this. It's really the employees that are being affected when they're forced to leave their job. Because the business owner who has all the leverage and all the influence, they're just going to do what any sane human being would do, and they're going to just fire anyone that doesn't comply with these new requirements because they don't want to be fined by the government. Hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially for businesses who have over 100 employees. That will be the consequence if one employee decides to not get vaccinated, whether it be for religious reasons, medical reasons, whatever. That is a problem. And if we at the People's National Party care about populism, if we care about the working families of America, we are going to stand with their rights. We are going to support them in whatever decision they make. If you want to get vaccinated, you are more than welcome to get vaccinated. In fact, we encourage it. The vaccines work. But if you don't want to get vaccinated, I don't care. We don't care. That's your personal medical decision. And requiring you to do it or not and risking your job over it is not right. It is not justifiable to do something like that, especially to the workers who are already earning starvation wages and are working long hours for little reward. And now you're going to say that even if you're a trucker and you work alone and you don't have anybody around you and you make good money, you make $60,000, $70,000 a year, you're able to support your family, you still need to get vaccinated, even if it goes against your personal views, even if you don't want to. That's the world we're living in now, and it's wrong. And I think most people would agree that it's wrong. This is a very libertarian perspective, but it's true. Which is why I would hope that a lot of left-wing libertarians and right-wing libertarians, people who are in supportive of personal freedom and individual rights in general, which hopefully is most people, I would hope that we could all unite over this and oppose these disastrous regulations and government overreach that is going to negatively affect our economy and the workforce. We're about to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out of jobs because they refused to take a jab in the arm. I'm not going to question why they did it or not. That's not my that's not my purpose here. But if they didn't want to take it, you can't punish them. So many companies and different businesses are getting fed up with this, specifically the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's news company. They are taking the Biden administration to court, basically, and they're saying this is not right, this is unconstitutional, and they're going to try to fight for the rights of the workers, or for themselves, who knows, right? I mean, maybe Daily Wire just doesn't want to have to pay $140,000 in fines per employee that refuses to get vaccinated. But that, like I said, this is the world we're going to live in now. So we need to either fight back or comply, which sounds like a very, again, a libertarian term. But in this case, when it comes to personal health decisions, it is absolutely true. The government has no right to regulate your body and your life. My body, my choice. Anyway, just not too great of a topic that we are addressing, but it needs to be said because there's walkouts and labor strikes, different labor unions fighting for the ability for their workers to not have to get the vaccine. We're seeing it in different companies, specifically with GM, General Motors in Michigan. There's been a bunch of walkouts in the factories because these employees are fed up. They're done. We're also seeing a bunch of labor shortages in first responders like firefighters, police officers, paramedics. These people are retiring or leaving their jobs after years and years of service because they don't want to get vaccinated. And as I said before, it is not the government's role to tell you what you should and should not put in your body. They can make suggestions, they can show you the facts, they can show you the pros and cons of doing it, but they cannot enforce it. And as populists, we will forever stand with the people, we will forever stand with the working man and his rights. Never shall those rights be taken away. Ever. Thank you so much, everyone. That will conclude our 8th episode. 2 months. That's pretty amazing. We've been doing this podcast for 2 months. It's been a great journey. I hope you guys have been enjoying the podcast. We have gotten plenty of views. A lot of people are active weekly listeners, which is awesome. And if you enjoy the podcast, we highly suggest you subscribe or follow us on Spotify or YouTube. And stay active with all of our social media posts, everything we have to say. Check out our website if you want to learn more about us, or feel free to email us or reach out to us in some way. And if you have any, as I said last week, if you have any topic ideas that you want to be addressed, please feel free to reach out as well regarding that issue, because we're always open to new ideas, always open to ways that we can better the podcast, better the party, and our agenda as a whole. So that'll do it, and I